solution by October, a new article would be quite desirable, no question. But we didn't think that a moratorium would be necessarily helpful to that. In a way, adding a moratorium and then coming up with a good article by August, if that, the selectmen will know what that article says, and I would be very surprised if they went quickly to an approval phase on some sign to beat the deadline. You know, I think they would look at the article and go, oh, thank goodness we have something here to help us out. So I really think a moratorium is unnecessary, and it just ties people's hands in unintended, you know, there will be some unintended consequences, I'm sure.
I just, from what you said, I just feel a little confused by what the sign committee, who apparently were appointed by the selectmen, and informed us, and correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, that oftentimes, sometimes, the selectmen don't listen to them.
That's correct.
Well,
Ted,
Well, thank you.
what can I say?
I'm not saying they're going to listen to something that they're anticipating.
If they
Sign these
see an
guys.
article coming down the pike, that might get their attention. But I would, anyway, that's the way the Warren Committee saw it.
All right.
Thank you.
And you're going to be heard on this at town meeting, and if the planning board comes in with a recommendation that the Warren Committee opposes, you
Off we go.
have a 50-50 chance of winning.
Right.
Just how would your committee feel about based on the discussions you've heard, I'm not asking you to speak on their behalf, but about it being sent back to the planning board as opposed to the Board of Selectmen?
Oh, I think we'd feel fine.
Okay, great.
We didn't want to
Excellent.
send it to both bodies.
Good move,
Okay?
yes, I feel.
So we chose the selectmen as being more immediately involved
Okay.
with that. If you would like to take this on, we'd be delighted. Your language shouldn't include the word back, because you never had it to begin with.
Yes. Refer to, yes, good point, thank you.
So, but it would, but as far as, you know, if you want to recommend a moratorium, that's grand. Warrant Committee may not agree with you.
Fair enough.
Before Bill says what he wants to say, I just want to reiterate, my position, I don't like moratoriums, and I'm very sympathetic to the situation with the several projects that we've mentioned. However, I'm very troubled by this sort of, the position the selectmen are put in to have to make a decision based on signage without any guidance at all. And these are all three projects that you mentioned are very visible projects that are going to have signs for a very long time. And I personally believe that it's worth having those projects wait a few extra months in order to make a good decision here. And I think it sets us up for a lot better proactive zoning in the future, as opposed to sort of evaluating these things on a one-off basis with no parameters upon which they're supposed to make their decision.
Well, your guidelines have plenty of parameters, don't they?
But they don't always listen to them.
Yes,
Our teeth, yeah.
yes, they have a lot more parameters than the bylaws do, yes.
I think Bill had something to say, and then I've got something to add, so,
I think I have a clarification.
But they're just
point.
guidelines.
yeah.
They have no teeth.
Right, but they're guidelines, and they do offer guidance.
Correct.
I think the point of the selectmen approve things that the sign review committee does not go with. I think that's happened once, right? That's just the Sleepies.
I think
And
it's just the
there's only,
It
there's
was
only
for
that.
Sleepy's and Kennedy's both at the same time.
Right, but it's the same building.
Same.
Well, I mean,
same
the
sign.
initial
Same-
sign and then
It's
the
the same
addition of the
issue for
addition.
that same sign.
Correct.
So twice they decided
Well,
not
no, I
to take
think
that
we were,
advice.
weren't we
Well, I think the
against their
second time
initial
they said it was
proposals for what
grandfathered.
they were asking for on the side of the building? Was that not also shot down?
But it never came back to the board to move it to the roof. That it was
Talking
on
about
the wall.
I'm talking about the gable sign.
The gable sign, the sign was designed,
No, the second sign.
So let's put it this way, on
second
what,
lit sign.
on the most offensive sign that we've seen, or people seem to find most offensive, they decided not to take the sign committee's recommendations.
Correct.
but that's the
I think
only
that says a
one.
lot.
Yeah. So I will also say, and I think this goes to Ted's point as well, if we approve this tonight with a moratorium, you know, and I am also resistant to the idea of a moratorium for various different reasons, which I won't extend by talking about now. But I think town meeting may strike the moratorium down. That's always possible. The Board of Selectmen may, probably watching this at home, I'm sure, come back and say, look, we understand the issue. We don't want a moratorium for whatever reason, but we understand. We're willing to work with you to not do this without putting a formal moratorium on. We still have time before town meeting to work some of this out, but I do think we should move to a vote tonight
Yes.
because we have to get back to the warrant committee for next week and be prepped for town meeting, so,
Half of something's better than nothing.
right.
Okay, so what is the motion?
To recommend that the town refer the issue of illuminated signs to the planning board for further study. The planning board will appoint a committee including members of the sign review committee and a citizen representative, and in the meantime, to approve a moratorium on lit signs through October 31st. On backlit signs. What are you doing?
This moratorium shall
Oh,
not affect-
thank you. This moratorium shall not in any way affect municipal signs and shall terminate on October 31st, 2015.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
What a good
Well done,
motion. Okay, any
Lit or
further
just lit?
discussion?
Backlit or lit?
Do we have a
Lit.
second on that particular motion? That's a second? Okay. Discussion? No further discussion? All in favor?
One final point.
Yeah.
I don't want to belabor this, but
Right.
might understand that if we include the language on the moratorium, that the warrant committee is going to oppose it, and that could.
Right, the
in
whole,
effect-
They
the
may
whole
oppose
thing
it.
goes
They may
down in
oppose it.
flames
They
if you.
They
if you-
currently oppose
If you
it.
throw it on there.
Well, no, not necessarily. We can always
You
change
can
that
always
recommendation.
excise it, that's
Yes.
right.
The
Yeah.
planning board is welcome to come talk to the warrant committee on Wednesday, the 29th,
This-
and we'll take
This
that
would
up.
this would be great. We will send a representative.
There may be information you have that we didn't have at the time that might sway some members' opinions.
And
Thank you.
it's worth having the conversation.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. Now, we were going to go on to the condominium bylaw, and there is a proposed amendment to the condominium bylaw having to do with a piece of property near my house, and the amendment could affect the value of my property. So I am not going to participate in this particular discussion.
All right, so I want to catch everybody up to where we are with this article on the Article 48, the condominium planned unit development. At the moment, there is an article on the warrant in front of town meeting. Planning board will have to take a vote tonight in order to get our recommendation to the warrant committee in time for town meeting on the article that's in front of town meeting. So we will be doing that tonight, and we'll call Alex back in for that because he does not have a conflict on the article that's in front of town meeting. Now, there has been discussions in front of the planning board about a possible amendment or amendments that may be offered at town meeting. So what the process would be at town meeting, for those who aren't familiar with it, is the article would come up, the warrant committee would give their recommendation, because there's not a recommendation in the warrant, and then the discussion at town meeting would begin. At that point, somebody or some bodies may come forward to offer one or more amendments. We have had several different, we've had two different possible amendments come forward. We've had comments on all of those come forward. Is this not working? Oh, it's just somebody just left it. We've had comments on all of those come forward. At our last meeting, there was a proponent of one amendment. Marion McCatrick is representing that proponent, who came forward. There was a group of neighbors who came forward with a possible amendment, and then there were several other neighbors who wished to speak in favor or against of either the original article or the amendment. So I'm going to ask Mrs. McCatrick to come forward to present what's going on. As I understand, there were going to be several meetings between our last meeting and this meeting. So I'd like to hear from her first, and then I'd like to hear from one or more neighborhood groups that may be discussing this, and we will hear from everybody possible on this article, as we do have to come up with the recommendation on the original article tonight. The planning board does not have to vote on any amendment tonight. We recognize that there may still be other conversations between now and town meeting. So we will not be voting on the amendment tonight, but we are eager to hear what progress has been made. So, Marion.
So actually, what I would like to do is to defer to the neighbors who may wish to speak, because I have not been at the meetings, but there
Okay.
have been meetings and discussions. So I don't actually have any information myself, but I'm eagerly interested in hearing what the discussion
Well, I
has
wanted to
been about.
bring you first because
Thank you,
yours
Dawn.
was the original amendment.
Yes,
So,
thank
yes.
Could you clarify for us whether we're in an open hearing right now, or if this is just a discussion?
This is a public hearing on the article, which
On
is
the-
not yet.
On the original
on
article?
the original article.
So we're not having a hearing on any further articles?
It's the only no, we're
there's
hearing
no-
this article with the understanding that
There
there
could
may
be an amendment.
There could be an amendment at town meeting. The complexity of the amendments that we have seen so far are such that it is a good idea for us to have the discussion in this public process of the hearing on the original article, so that any town meeting members who may, and any other citizens who may be watching, are aware that this comes forward, or may come forward. But that's the other reason we're not taking a vote tonight, is it has not been a formal proposal.
Correct.
So this is just an opportunity for members of the public, interested residents, interested proponents to talk about these amendments that we have heard may be a possibility. So, neighbors, yes, please identify yourself and where you live.
Hello, good evening. Paul Krasinski, living at 5 Stonehill Lane in Milton, and representing myself as well as the Hillside Neighborhood Association this evening under a formal vote that was taken on Tuesday evening as well at the Hillside Neighborhood Association meeting. So thank you for the continuance from 2 weeks ago. I think certainly it was proving productive and valuable, and certainly I personally have learned a tremendous amount, although, and have a tremendous amount of respect for all of the real estate experts and otherwise. And clearly this is a complex issue with many moving parts. And over the last, 3 years, we've kind of moved at a glacial speed on this as we considered all of the options. I think really over the last 2 weeks, I think I would applaud both parties, Mr. Hamilton, as well as the neighbors, for really becoming engaged, creative, innovative, and kind of looking at designing a solution. So the time afforded countless calls, in-person meetings with Mr. Hamilton, 2 H&A meetings, a financial model to be drawn up, a 12-lot plan, and a potential resolution to be explored through, and as well, informal discussions with potential builders. First, before I kind of recount and articulate kind of where we are, the timeline, and kind of the recommendation, I think I would like to say, Mr. Hamilton certainly dispelled a lot of perceptions or misperceptions in kind of the neighborhood, and really proved to be an innovative, creative, and person who was willing to negotiate and was open to new ideas. So I think that was really important for us. Second is, the neighborhood really rallied around this understanding that it's a critical issue not only for the neighborhood, but as the town at large as we consider, this bylaw. So together, Mr. Hamilton and I talked about drafting an agreement together, a document that would highlight, the potential for a 12-lot plan that could enable the owner, the developer, and the neighborhood to win. And I think, Marion made that kind of clear distinction in our last meeting around owner and developer, and I think that will be important as we kind of discuss this further. And really, it would enable all 3 parties to win, both from a financial perspective. As we talked about, this was a business transaction, one that would increase and maximize profit, but also minimize the impact on the neighborhood. So truly mutually beneficial for all parties. This plan enabled 12 lots, single-family homes, neighborhood support for a site-specific zoning variant or rezoning or variance, and empower a builder or homeowner to buy these lots and deliver against the plan, thus averting a 40B and potential for high density, including 45 condos. And we had on Tuesday evening a near unanimous vote with 2 dissenters from the neighborhood that for the support of this plan. which, I would sit there and again applaud both parties. And I think we were both willing, Mr. Hamilton and myself representing the neighborhood, to sign a document that would memorialize this collective support, and it would have been an incredible outcome for all of us. However, there was one stipulation that was incredibly important to the developer, which was the support for the condo bylaw and the 45 condo units. Mr. Hamilton thought that this would buy us time as we continued to organize toward the 12-lot plan, and it would also enable us to buy time with the owner who, in his own right and fair to feel this way, has been through a very long process where, waiting on the sidelines for 12 months while 40B is, held back to look at creative options, and now he's ready to monetize and capitalize on this property to generate, generational wealth for his, his family, which we can't blame him. However, while we figured out the process, I kind of probed a bit further, and it seems like, this is where the distinction between owner and developer really came to bear for all of us, which was, Mr. Hamilton acting in a cooperative fashion, in a collaborative fashion, working with the neighborhood, going through. It became clear to me that really there is performance that is required, and there is a continued pressure on Mr. Hamilton to file the application for 40B. And if the condo bylaw was denied, and really the main driver for that is through these discussions, as I understood, was really the owner does not have any interest in sitting out for another 12 months while we figure this out. And so as we continue to discuss it further, we were saying, hey, is it possible to create a recommendation where we have the 12 lots in the plan that we all agreed to, and enable potential constraint of saying, hey, you won't have to sit out the 12 months. Because if truly this bylaw was about Mr. Hamilton not intending to truly build those 45 condominiums, but rather buy us time, and it wasn't the intention to, build on that lot, rather to have a roadway and a bridge to some form of development there, wouldn't it be better just to try to continue to figure this out? So therefore, this deal ultimately hinged on the bylaw. And it was really important not just for the neighborhood, and as we discussed it as a neighborhood on Tuesday night, it became clear that, this was bigger than the neighborhood. This project and initiative was then bigger than the neighborhood, and we just could not support the bylaw for 45 units. And ultimately, we felt like it was out of our hands as a neighborhood, but rather it was really back to, the town to determine, what this precedent is setting. And it was really more important than, buying time ultimately for an owner who is eager to ultimately sell and capitalize. So as I understood it, where we left things was that, with the timing, should you vote tonight to either reject or deny, the thought process would be that the pressure will be there from the owner to apply and file that application for 40B. And then and that would be in May. The goal, though, would be to say, hey, how do we continue the very, very productive and creative conversations that we've had that almost led to me being able to present a document this evening with both signatures from myself or an H&A member and Mr. Hamilton back to you. So ultimately, it came down to timing. It came down to really one criteria, which, let's recall, if this is about buying time and there was not an intention to build on the land, and Mr. Hamilton highlighted that he has been successful in his other projects, and he's looking at retirement and he doesn't want to build there. He would much rather look at that property with a bridge, a roadway, and utilities, and really be done with that project at that point. It was unfortunate. So I think, honestly, if we had the opportunity and a little more time, I think we would be able to look at this creative option, which again was, 12 up to 12 lots, single-family homes, support for rezoning and/or variance as you guys decided, and go through the process. Obviously, we understood that there were constraints or things that we needed to move through, which was, does the land perk for 12 lots? Planning, zoning, conservation commission, and the desire to not wait and sit out for an additional 12 months. But wouldn't it be sad and tragic if we had the ability to figure this out without a high density, high volume, and come to a creative resolution? So our goal is, regardless of what happens with the owner and the developer, we decided that we will not support the 45-unit condo. We do support the plan that we outlined, and we really hope that regardless of what is filed, and I understand that the 40B filing, the application can be filed with the state, but cannot be filed with the town until March. That gives us a lot of time. So as we talk about buying time, it seems like a artificial, obviously it's on the warrant, it's, has to be a binary vote, but I feel like we're so close. So ultimately, I think this came down to an insurance policy on both sides. I think both sides acted in good faith, tried to figure out the solution. I think we were very close. This was the issue, and obviously there's a vote tonight that has to happen for May, which I think has ripple effects to moving us toward 40B, although the neighborhood felt as though the 45 unit condo bylaw really was out of our hands at that point. It was less about neighborhood, and it was more about kind of the town of Milton and what the precedent is that sets. So ultimately, we felt as though, we can look at the 12-lot plan, and felt as though we didn't have insurance to say, hey, well, if we go along with the 45 condo bylaw, then what insurance do we have that we're going to go down that 12-lot plan? And his argument was, well, what's the insurance that I have that if we go down this 12-lot plan and it can't get perked or something happens through that process, someone appeals, someone gets denied or rejected, what's my fallback? I have to wait another 12 months. So ultimately, an incredibly productive process, and again, I can't reiterate both to the neighbors and to Mr. Hamilton. I think it was a very spirited, engaging, non-emotional. We kind of set the standards and the rules of this is a business transaction. This is what we're looking to accomplish here. So ultimately, I think, both, and I think this is really important, both Mr. Hamilton and the neighborhood agreed to 12 lots, site-specific rezoning for 12 lots, single-family homes, the potential of no 40B or condos by future owners as part of that agreement. However, the bylaw was that sticking point, and we just could not support that bylaw. So therefore, and I know you asked for the timeline last time, but if denied or rejected, I believe the next step is filing for 40B with Massachusetts, understanding that 40B can't be until March with the town. And our goal would be to say, I hope that we can still come to a creative agreement on 12 lots. We understand that the risk of 40B will be filed. However, the ability to continue a resolution where we both avoid the cost, the time, the expense, and the frustration that we've all seen. And again, the glacier pace is interesting because I think the glacier receded. I think both highlighted the benefit. And saw the benefit and come to an agreement. So really, I think if we look at this from an objective standpoint, the time should not be the limiting factor here on a binary vote. And really 45 condos or 40B, clearly in a 40B case, you're looking and you're willing to wait, if you're Mr. Fandry, the owner, for potentially 3 or 4 years to see that actually come to bear.
Okay,
Here,
so-
we're looking at 12 houses, and we should be able to wait until October. So it's definitely an important decision for all of us, not just the neighbors. Mr. Hamilton highlighted that. And it does, though, set precedent more broadly for the town of Milton, which really is above kind of this, quote, project. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. Members, any questions for him?
What was the acreage, what's the total acreage?
total acreage is 15 acres total on the property.
Thank you.
Question for you. You referenced October at the end there, so is your intention to hopefully be back in front of the town with an article for August that would be on the October warrant?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what is the resolution here. I think there's no question that the options are now more limited, but I think the neighborhood kind of came to consensus or general consensus with one or two dissenters, highlighting that we would like to continue to figure out that resolution, even if 40B is filed in an application to the state of Massachusetts.
If they go to 12-lot subdivision, in fact, they wouldn't need to have an article relative to that site.
They probably would
I
because
think
of
they do because of wetlands, and it's not 15 contiguous lots, right? That's including the A&R lot.
Yeah, so the A&R lot.
And it's one.
Is it double A or?
It's double A, so it's 2-acre lots.
Right.
You're contiguous, the only thing you're missing is the double A.
Right. So you need a variance or some modification of
Right.
the bylaw to
So
be able to
would
build
they need an
at
article
that
for
density.
12 lots up there, or would they need a variance?
Need a variance
Yeah,
for the
so it'd be a
density.
variance. So they wouldn't have to write up an article
They're
to do
just,
that.
I see.
You could go either way. I mean, you could put in new language that would allow you to.
Right, but they wouldn't need to. They could just go with a variance.
Or you could go for the variance.
Which, if all the neighbors were in favor, I think would
Yes.
be a process
if
that
all
would
the neighbors are in
probably
favor,
be
that
very
is the way to go.
positive.
Yeah, I think it would be a very positive process. And in reality, again, it's unfortunate that, the timing of this vote and town meeting is driving the decision, which just doesn't seem,
But it's-
that way.
Just a comment,
Sure.
when you talked about perking, and I had a little discussion with Bill, I mean, apparently they're thinking of septic on site for houses, fine. And that could be a problem, but, unless I'm confused, whether you go 40B or you put in 45 townhouses, there could be a problem with any of those processes.
This is true, and
So for him to say that, it doesn't perk and then I get stuck, well, you could try 45 condo units, you might get stuck. You could try 40B and you might get stuck.
right. Yeah, and I think that was the realism of, the constraints on both sides. And I think we were willing to work through those constraints together. And ultimately, the A&R lot, just so you are aware, it would be required inside of this project. There was a pending legal action on that A&R lot. However, in conversations with the neighbors, it was something where they felt comfortable, inclusive of Mr. Corliss, who had filed that action, to say, yes, we understand that we're going for the greater good here. But again, if we talk about timing, we talk about insurance. Insurance is, 45 condos was Mr. Hamilton's insurance. Mr. Corliss's insurance was the, litigation and the appeal. And really ours was, hey, if we go along with this bylaw, we're not really sure because we don't have it and we don't see the contractual paperwork to say that, that will say, hey, we tried our hardest, it didn't perk for 12, and therefore we have to go to 45. It just didn't make sense for us.
All right, Paul, thank you very much.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to hear from anybody else who wishes to speak on this. Yes? Yeah.
Good evening, Tim Kernan. I'm on the Townhouse Condominium Bylaw Subcommittee and also president of the Brush Hill Area Neighborhood Association. Just to digress for 1 second, earlier you were talking about reviewing possible articles for the October, zoning articles for the October town
Yes.
meeting. Previously, I think a number of people have commented that summer is just a horrible time to do that. I realize there's not much you can do about it, but I did want to raise that as a comment. There has been expressed the feeling that the Townhouse Condominium Bylaw Subcommittee, which was created this past fall, is disorganized and not making progress. I have a very different opinion. The committee was formed for the purpose of making determination as to whether it is possible, and perhaps advisable, to write a townwide bylaw which provides the development of townhouse condominiums. The effort springs from the pressure which arises from 40B as developers pursue their interests in building out property, yet find that their options, as provided under the town zoning bylaw, do not match their needs. In such cases, developers, in one hand, hang the threat of 40B over the neighborhood, and in the other hand, propose plans which require special zoning. Neighborhoods understandably crumble under the threat of special zoning when special zoning is created. We saw this at St. Pius, and now we, at least last week, saw it at Hillside and see little pieces of it still remaining at Hillside, although I'm glad to hear there's some cooperation. The prevailing feeling was that this special permit approach to zoning is not good for the neighbors because they are forced to react and cannot enjoy the benefits of real planning. Not good for developers because he is exposed to long delays given the need to prepare and present new zoning articles to town meeting, in addition to being exposed to the risk that the zoning would fail town meeting. And not good for the town as a whole, as it deprives the town of its right to control its zoning as a meaningful way and deters otherwise good development opportunities. So then, the subcommittee was formed to see if it's possible to write a townwide condominium bylaw so that developers could apply for such permitting without going through the long delay and risky town meeting process. At one of our early meetings, each member presented a list of ideas, concerns, or thoughts about the task at hand. I think it's instructive to mention a few of these because as our meetings continued, many of these items resurfaced, illustrating their importance. How do we preserve open space where it's available? What's the proper density in the various sections of town? How do we preserve the unique characteristics of each site? Will town meeting accept? How will the neighborhood associations get involved? How do we preserve historic and scenic roads? How do we maintain the neighborhood character? How do we avoid knee-jerk reactions, such as we've been seeing in the past relative to these developments? A broad-based bylaw may be complex, and should we take a phased approach? How do we preserve topology and natural features? Some would argue that there are two circumstances which drew the committee off course. First was the consideration of a draft version of a townwide bylaw written by a member, which in part originated from the St. Pius zoning passed last fall. The second was a request by the planning board to provide them with feedback relative to a citizen's article submitted for consideration at this coming town meeting. That's the one we're talking about tonight. Distraction is a measure relative to one's objective. If the committee's objective is to determine whether or not such a townwide bylaw can be created, then it seems to me that the committee needs to formulate a set of guidelines or standards to be used as a basis upon which to make their assessment as to the end. And in the end, can the question be asked and answered relative to these standards? As illustrated above, it is not an easy process, and there's a lot to consider. I maintain that the committee is right on target. There is no distraction. What better way is there to flesh out the standards than to use live cases? These two distractions are indeed the nucleus upon which the committee has engaged in a rich discussion from which drops the very standards which are needed to make their decisions. It is my opinion, and indeed one shared by many members of the committee, not only that it is impossible to craft such a single bylaw for the development of condominiums on a townwide basis, but that it is insofar as the neighbor areas which we have discussed relative to this article, i.e. Hillside, Upper Canton Ave, and the former Muse area, among others, is a bylaw which these neighborhood areas are dramatically opposed to. To propose to inject a series of developments which is foreign to the existing construct of a neighborhood is contradictory to the fabric of that neighborhood and runs against the existing zoning and should not be pursued. So I just wanted to reiterate that I think that for this committee to pursue a townwide bylaw committee at this time, I don't think the neighbors are for it. I've heard from a number of different neighborhood associations, they don't want it. I think it was very helpful to have the discussion that we've had with the committee, and through this board here, people have begun to hear the issues and see what they are. I just don't think people want to see it, so I would urge you to move forward without such a townwide bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to speak on this? All right. Oh, come forward.
Good evening. Scott Johnson, 11 Hillside Street. I want to address, first of all, the previous statement by the Hillside Neighborhood Association and verify that we were very clear last night that it was not definitely a 12 12-unit subdivision, but up to 12 units, because we can't be positive about how the area will perk. So we don't want to be backed into a situation where if we can't do 12, the deal falls through if we're able to strike a deal of that nature.
Excuse me, for the benefit of the viewers at home, could you explain what perk means?
That means that they can put the sewage system in that can accommodate that many houses. And there is a substantial amount of wetland at that property, I believe.
Just some thoughts on that. If they were to put in 45 townhouses, my understanding that they would tie into public sewage. If they put in 12 homes, they don't want to tie it. From what I've heard in the discussion that's gone on, the developer and the owner are certainly trying to, for lack of better words, maximize profit. So if they found that the 12-house development was a receptive vehicle for them to make profit, then I can't believe that they're making significantly less profit than they would on 45 townhouses. In which case, I don't understand why they wouldn't tie those houses into the public sewage.
I don't think the
In which case, I don't think that the percolation of the soil in the area would be that significant.
You know, you bring up the idea of profitability, and I don't think that the people of the neighborhood in any way want to deny the profitability to the developer. I mean, we're very aware that if you give any person with a not-in-my-backyard attitude the same opportunity that the developer has, and those people have paid taxes on the land for a long time, I think all of us are probably, for the most part, if we need, especially if we needed the money, we're going to try to maximize profit. So we looked at this from the perspective of, as a neighborhood in the meeting, from a perspective of how could we get the profit to the developer. We're not looking to do that, and we're trying to look at a way to make a shorter cut for them to be able to develop and get their profit, which means less expense for them. And it means a better, more conforming development plan that fits in with the neighborhood as a whole. That being said, the condos leave the entire town open to, I think, a very dangerous precedent. It's obvious that people are trying to develop every stitch of land around this town, which affects the whole character of the town. And what I want to specifically address is this rumor that's been perpetuated that condos will not put the stress on the school system that they say they will. And to anybody that's thinking they're going to get a tax windfall from two-bedroom condos, I think there's no evidence at all to support that whatsoever. I'm a landlord in the town, and I rent two-bedroom apartments, and by far, the vast majority of the people that apply for them are people with children, trying to get into the town, looking for a less expensive way than buying, and trying to get into the school system with their children. Sometimes I see 3 and 4 children, even up to 5 children in a two-bedroom apartment, that people are trying to get into the town to get their children educated. I don't blame them for that, but this puts a burden on the school system in which we're getting less tax revenue. And that's the pragmatic reality of the situation that some of these pie-in-the-sky thinkers think. So I am, just from a pragmatic perspective, adamantly opposed to a condominium bylaw in the town. One, it'll change our way of life, it'll change the atmosphere and the bucolic beauty of the town. And 3, it's going to increase our tax burden as opposed to increase our tax revenue. Any questions?
Any questions, guys?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to speak to this?
Denny Swenson, Green Street. I just was wondering if I could, there was a lot to digest, a big update on the Hillside neighborhood. Does the Hillside neighborhood want even the article
Danny, you need to
version,
speak into
the
the
article
mic, yeah.
version that had 22 condo units, or is the Hillside neighborhood no longer wants the article?
We do not want the article. We voted almost unanimously against the article.
Okay. I know at the beginning of the meeting you said that you didn't want to, you wanted to vote on the initial article, but not get into the all the new versions.
Because there's no formal amendment for us to vote on at this point, yes. So it
Good,
would be the
good.
initial.
Okay.
Do you wish to speak to the initial article?
Yes.
Okay, there's a reason I want to ask that. So
Yeah.
Alex can vote on the initial article. So if we're going to be moving away from the discussion of the amendments, I want to bring Alex back in so that he can be part of any discussions on the original article. But that means before we get there, if you don't mind holding on for a second,
Well-
does anybody else want to talk to the amendments?
I want to
Okay,
talk
all
to
right,
those
so
two.
then let's split.
Does anyone, okay.
Okay.
So I was thinking that just for the sake of all the neighborhoods, it's important to let us know tonight, if possible, if all those other versions are off the table as well. In other words, I just think it's important for all of us to sort of know what we're walking into at town meeting, because, leaving us all to wonder, what, if any, version will end up on the floor of town meeting, is just not respectful to the citizens, and that, our communities need a chance to understand, evaluate, and respond to each potential version. So, putting any version forward, especially after this point, any new version in the 11th hour, deprives all of us of a meaningful opportunity to do that. So that's my request.
So I think that's a very valid request.
Thank you.
So we are not bringing in an alternative version, so we know that. So then the next question is, Paul from the Hillside, you guys are not bringing any alternative versions in? Marion, you're the one who had brought up an original potential amendment. Do you want to come forward and speak now? Is this an appropriate moment for you? Great.
Well, it's obvious from Paul Krasinski's comments that a lot of work has been going on in the neighborhood, and a lot of interesting progress has been made. And he's a great speaker, and he really clearly explained where there are still differences and where there is a desire to still explore, specifically that 12-unit development. And this is pertinent to the amendment. I did want to clarify a couple of things. It's my understanding that if there were the amendment that I have proposed would be for a condominium development that would use on-site sewage treatment. It would not connect. The sewer is at the beginning of Hillside Street, so it's a long connection. If there were to be a 40B development up on that site, the concept that's been discussed is about 76 units, then public sewer would have to be brought into the site, and that is a very substantial expense, extremely substantial. So if there were to be a 12-unit single-family development, then presumably if the engineering work that's been done thus far has indicated that you could do on-site commingled treatment for sewage for 45 units, that you could probably find a way to do sewage treatment for 12. So I'm not saying that it isn't going to turn out to be a problem, but I don't see that as the primary issue. Mm-hmm. I also see, and I haven't discussed this with, the neighborhood group or anything, but now that I hear what the proposal is, I believe, well, there would be, one way you could do such a proposal is to take the cluster zoning bylaw, single family, go to the Board of Appeals and ask for a variance for anything that you need a variance for. You would need a variance to do 12 units because with all the conditions and restrictions in that bylaw, you wouldn't reach 12 units. Right. So that would be one vehicle. And as you pointed out, if the neighborhood were strongly supportive of such an option, then it's possible that a Board of Appeals would consider it and would view it positively. So now to go back to the amendments. I mean, Paul Krasinski's kind of laid it all out for you. From the developer and the owner's standpoint, they wanted to keep this amendment alive because they thought it was they'd like to have it as an option in lieu of a 40B proposal, which would be the next step if this other development can't be worked out. But the neighborhood is, they've considered it, they've discussed it, they've taken a vote. So we've heard from the neighborhood association that they're not going to support any condominium amendment that would apply to this site. So that's the answer from the neighborhood. I've only had one conversation, that was late this afternoon, with the developer who's spoken to the owner. So, you know, the position that they gave me was, we still think there ought to be that option on the table. We think it's better to consider a 45-unit condominium development than a 75-unit 40B proposal. These are just conceptual ideas. So I deliver that information to the planning board. I think, nevertheless, I understand that it's quite difficult for a planning board to support an amendment when you don't have neighborhood support for it. So that's why it's before you. The particular amendment that I gave you, you know, there could have been some changes made to that, but the density issue is a key issue in terms of what value it represents for the property as an alternative to another more dense type of affordable housing development. And that's why it's been proposed at that density. So that's for the planning board to discuss and think about. If you're not ready to do anything tonight, that's one thing. If you're sure you're ready, then everybody probably needs to know. If you're not going to support an amendment, if it is proposed.
I just want to clarify, you are definitely going to propose that amendment on behalf of your client.
I'm telling you that as of tonight, my
Okay.
client is saying to me, we think it's a good idea to keep that amendment on the table, but they would like to have the support of the planning board. And I recognize the difficulty that you're faced with in that regard. Because, you know, an amendment without the support of the planning board is problematic. We're available to discuss this with the warrant committee. We have been invited to come and discuss it with the warrant committee next week. But we'll see what happens tonight. I want to say, nevertheless, I think a great deal of progress has been made. I think there is an option on the table being discussed. I think a lot of good will and good effort has gone into that, and so I just want to thank everybody thank you for listening to these ideas, and thank you to the neighborhood for working on them with the developer and the owner.
Thank you very much. So, gentlemen, we have two options before we bring Alex back in to talk to the main one. We could, if we wanted to, take a position on the amendment tonight. We've heard that there would be just one amendment that might be brought forward, and that's the one that we've already seen. We could also hold off and wait for the amendment to be brought to the floor of town meeting and see town meeting's reaction before taking a formal position. We've certainly had the ability to review and understand the implications of the amendment. We may or may not wish to hear town meeting's comments on it before we take a formal position. And certainly in the past, we've had precedent where we don't take a position. We don't usually know there's going to be an amendment until we get to the floor of town meeting. So, or we could discuss it through tonight and come to a vote on it, recognizing that we still need to bring Alex in for a vote on the main article. So what's your pleasure?
First of all, I don't support the article that's in the warrant.
Right.
In which case, I don't support an amendment to an article I don't support. Beyond that, even if I supported the article, I think the amendment that was offered is, again, I tried to state it last time, to me, and by definition, the word amendment, it's more than just an amendment, it's almost a rewrite. And like one of the citizens stated tonight, I think it would be unfair to town meeting members to give them such a significant rewrite to digest instantaneously at town meeting and vote on. So no, I'm like I say, opposed to the article and the amendment.
Brian, any thoughts?
From the standpoint that, whether it's fair to give the town meeting such a significant change on the town meeting floor, I'm not sure that that's our purview. It sounds like this amendment might be made.
If
the
moderator
it's accepted
accepts
by the
it,
moderator.
then yes.
So, to that extent, I am, I do think that this board should probably take a position on it one way or the other. Clearly, Mr. Kelly has done so. I have my thoughts on it. I actually am not convinced I'm prepared to take a final position on it tonight without a discussion amidst the board of each point. So whether we want to take the time at 8:30 to do that tonight, I'm not sure. So I'm not in a position to make a motion. I'm interested in hearing others' thoughts.
Ed, do you have any?
I'm going to abstain, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
So I am, I recognize that although there's a possibility that the town moderator may declare it within the scope of the article, it is a significant change to the article. It is more restrictive than the original article, but it is a change. I also, and the town moderator may change his mind. He's not making the ruling to the floor of town meeting. He doesn't make the ruling to the floor of town meeting. So I don't feel, we recognize that there's only one amendment coming forward. That amendment has already been given to us. It is a public document. I'm assuming it will be given to town meeting members the first night of town meeting. I don't think it's necessarily appropriate that we take a vote on it tonight. I agree we need further discussion. I would also not want to anticipate the moderator's ruling by taking a vote on it tonight. So,
Hearing your comments.
But, and I just want to clarify.
Certainly.
yeah, this is on the amendment, not the original
The amendment,
article.
speaking
Yes.
on the amendment.
Yes.
I understand what you said, and I wholeheartedly agree with what you said. It's not our purview to say whether it can be brought to town meeting or not. It was just of my opinion.
Yes.
I understand.
That I couldn't support
I
it.
understand that.
Yeah.
If there's going to be a vote taken by the planning board, I can.
We know that in advance.
And I understand what you said about discussion, but
Yeah.
I've heard quite a bit of discussion.
I understand.
In tonight's meeting, in the previous meeting.
It was
It's helped me
discussion among,
formulate this
yes.
opinion. It's not an
Yeah.
instantaneous.
So, to what you just said, Emily, to the extent that there's not a formal amendment proposed at this point, to the extent that we want to use this time to work with something that is before this board officially on other matters, and to the point that I think it would be interesting to hear town meetings comments. I guess I'm not actually, I think I would defer at this point to making a ruling. I would like to hear more information.
So I think what we should do is we should put this on our agenda for May 4th.
Yes.
That we would discuss whatever amendment is formally presented to town meeting
If
at that
any.
point. Hang on. Yes, Ted.
Hi.
Come on up.
Welcome back.
Always nice to hear from the warrant committee.
Sorry.
No, please no.
Questions for you.
Yes, fire away.
What time is your meeting before the
6:30.
6:30.
My understanding is that the moderator believes this draft recommendation would be within the scope.
Yes.
That's our understanding.
But he has also said, my understanding, he's also said that he will not make the formal ruling until it's actually at town meeting.
Uh-huh.
So that's why I don't want to jump the gun if possible.
What we
That's
were
part
told
one.
as a member of the condo committee, town council has ruled it is within scope. Town moderator has said he agrees, but will not rule until town meeting.
So that's what we understand so far.
Because, of course, the warrant committee has to make a recommendation
We
for town meeting
we will be
on this
giving-
article.
Okay, we're giving you a recommendation tonight. We will vote on the article, the
Yes.
actual article in the warrant tonight.
Yes.
But we have to bring Alex back in to do that.
And that's grand.
Yes.
However, the warrant committee is in possession of the initial draft recommendation from Ms. McKettrick, and that could, in fact, become the warrant committee recommendation.
Well, that would be interesting, because if it becomes a warrant committee recommendation, we will need to have a vote on that.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Before town meeting. I believe we're meeting with you next week.
That'll be nice.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
No, that's
What is
good.
the date on that meeting?
It's the 29th.
29th.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes,
Sorry, can we get clarification on 2 points, please?
of course.
So one is.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, no, that would be great. And it's more for us innocent bystanders.
Right.
So the clarification on Marion's comment, which is that you asked, are you for or against the amendment at this point? And she highlighted that as of this evening, my clients are pushing forward with the amendment. What does that mean exactly?
So they would be proposing, my understanding is they would be proposing the amendment on the floor of town meeting, the one that we have seen so far. Is that correct, Marion? So far, there have been no changes? The amendment that you would propose would be the one that we have seen as of this evening?
There may be some small changes
Okay,
to it.
so.
We really haven't been,
Yeah, please come forward. Mike's, yes. I just want to make sure that when people leave this room, we all understand what's going to happen.
I have reviewed the amendment in light of the discussion that I have listened to, and I have looked at some possible changes to the amendment that I wrote
Right.
in view of some of those comments. But my client has not decided whether to tell me to put those, to recommend put those amendments in the proposed language, because, first of all, the discussion with the neighborhood is going on. I want to hear from the planning board, and we weren't sure what the disposition of the alternative amendment was going to be. And because the key difference was density,
Right.
and we can't change the density, at least given the reasons why the amendment is being proposed as it has. And yeah, you were also asking me, are we going to propose the amendment at town meeting? Are we going to pursue it with the warrant committee? Well, I have agreed to meet with the warrant committee next week to discuss it.
Right.
But I would urge all parties to continue the discussion of what they would really like to see. That's just my personal view. I think a lot can be accomplished, and a lot has been accomplished. So the reason to ask for the amendment at town meeting and before the warrant committee would be because it's preferable as an alternative. Should this much preferred 12-unit development not work for some reason, it would be a preferred alternative to a denser 40B development. That's the only other option that's on the table. So that's why the developer is saying to me, and the owner is saying, well, we still think, this zoning amendment ought to be available. That's why I'm still talking about it.
Right, but given what you've just said, it is definitely premature for us to take a vote tonight,
Yes.
because there may be changes
I
between
agree.
now
So,
and then.
so there's two
yeah.
things about that, right? So let's look at kind of the historical chronology of this process, and I would just urge everyone to be very sensitive to that, because I think there's been fits and starts of either we're looking at this amendment or we're not looking at it. We really don't want to have zero time as a neighborhood, as we've all worked very, very hard. As of today, my commentary with Mr. Hamilton was, hey, we agree to disagree on the 45. We believe that amendment is about buying time, and if it's voted down or denied, immediately a 40B development will be filed as an application with the state. Now, tonight, we're hearing something a little bit different, right? What we're hearing is, again, let's bifurcate the developer-owner conversation. The developer is clearly telling me that the pressure is there with this amendment. The only reason we would have gone with the amendment was to buy time, because the owner wants 40B now. Now I'm hearing Mrs. McKettrick say that, now he may not be interested in pursuing 40B as hard, and there is a preferred 12-lot solution. So what I'm trying to get at is, if you look at all the work that's been done, and I'm talking an extremely diligent process with a financial model that looked at the time value of money over the next 3 years, 4 years. If we looked at those 12 lots, we ran comparables in the neighborhood that range from $550,000 to $750,000. Above $550,000, this deal works at $550,000 and above, and for up to 12 houses, this deal works for all parties involved. So I'm unclear, and I just don't want to have a series of events happen between now and otherwise where we're not fully aligned and in lockstep. We've been burned by a 11th hour change, which led to the neighborhood hiring a 40B lawyer, which, by the way, has been completely inactive through the entire process. So there's been no activity with Witten, who was hired as a 40B. It was stated, hey, we're looking at, if this doesn't happen, we'll file 40B. The normal reaction of any human being would be to say, I better protect myself as a layperson. So I just don't want to get surprised. I think we've all gone way too far in this process. We've spent a lot of time. I think Mr. Hamilton, again, has proven and dispelled the myths of him being the villain. But I think now, owner and developer are saying different things represented by one person, and I just want clarity. I think we owe it to the neighborhood to be clear. We owe it to the neighborhood to play the process directly by the line so that we all have time and there's no, back channel additions that we don't see, that we can't caucus on, that we can't consider prior to. And if that's the case, we should move to take the amendment off the table and push it to an October where really the zoning conversations happen in that town meeting as a zoning meeting versus there's no pressure, there was no pressure to put it into this May one until it was put on the warrant, and it was pushed up to be in May versus October. So I think between now and October, there's a lot of good things that can happen.
So
I
then
think
the best.
This board
go ahead.
agrees with that,
Yeah.
I think, but we have to respond to, I don't think this board's going to make any moves. So when you talk about being aligned, we will have to respond to whatever is submitted by the developer's amendment, is submitted by the neighborhood's amendment, or if nothing is submitted, then we'll be taking a vote tonight on the existing article.
Well, we're taking a vote tonight on the
Exactly.
existing article, no matter what.
Either
because
way,
we have to-
either way, that's
We
what-
have to have a recommendation
So-
for town meeting, but just because, so.
We can't control whether a
Yes.
final hour change happens, is what I'm trying to say to you, from the standpoint that an amendment can be made on the floor of town meeting, and we'll all be responding to a final change.
Yeah, and just to remember, just to clarify the process, so the warrant committee will get up, they will make the recommendation, whatever that article is, whatever that recommendation is to the article, we will have our recommendation in hand for the original one, and anybody at any point in the discussion can bring forward an amendment. So what the best clarity I have now from what I'm hearing is there may be an amendment based loosely on the draft that or based very specifically, but based on the draft that we have already, but that draft may change between now and then. That amendment may or may not happen between now and then. And so there's no vote we can take on the amendment tonight, except to be aware that there are continuing conversations about that. So what we can do.
Bring Alex.
It's just
Yes.
general discussion, but I can't help but be almost like as a citizen here, be curious. You're saying that the condo development would be a good option.
What I'm saying,
And maybe I'm not worried, it would be an option.
it could be an option.
It could be an option. So with that said, again, just, I'm trying to separate myself and speak as a citizen. Why in turn wouldn't he still go for the 45B and have another option? I mean, he's going to go for the development of the condos, he's going to pursue the 12 units, and he might as well submit the 45B at the same time. Why
Well, if
wouldn't
that's
you?
the concern, then that should be put on the table. I haven't been sitting in on these discussions. I don't think we're on a different page here. I mean, I've only had a brief conversation this afternoon.
Right.
You've had a lot more, and you've had a lot more conversations with the neighborhood. So I want to make it clear, I don't think there's a difference. I'm not, if I'm confusing things, it's only because I've done less talking with anybody than you have,
Right.
Paul. And so what.
But you
I mean,
represent.
anybody
but
would
the
be foolish to
representation-
believe that the more options, the better.
So we
Right,
have.
I think
That's
we,
right.
I think we
It's good to have
all,
options other than 40B. That's all I'm saying.
right,
So we
but
have a question in the back. Let me
Yep.
just, because I think it,
Hi.
hey, come on up. Introduce yourself.
I was going to keep quiet, but now I'm concerned. I'm Judy George.
Yep.
I'm on 52 Ford Ranch Road. And I was hopeful. Paul has done a outstanding job pulling the whole neighborhood together, not only the abutters. And we have a good feeling that he's made a lot of progress. But now I'm sitting back here, and Marion comes up, and I just heard what she had to say, and I am questioning the viability of what has been said by Paul to the HSN, and then what Marion just said right now. So we would like that taken off. I think we've gone in good faith. I think Paul's done a miraculous job of getting a lot of people to go to the extent that they have. And throwing at us, oh yeah, but we still want the 45, and oh yeah, we still want the 40B to be a consideration, throws cold water on me. And it makes me feel less optimistic. So that's all I have to say. I'm really hopeful that Paul will do the magnificent job he has, and that him and Mr. Hamilton, but when the lawyer comes who represents both the owner and him and sounds different, that makes me nervous.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you will take that back to your client now
I
that
will
you've
take
heard
that back to my
Yes.
client.
So-
I do understand that position.
Okay.
And I guess, trying to think of how best to put this. That's why I said, I think everybody needs to continue to work on this. I
Yeah.
think it's pretty clear that this is a good option.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think we have consensus on
You
that.
have received positive feedback
Mm-hmm.
from the owner-developer duo that it's a positive option. That's a good place to be.
Yeah,
From
I
the
think the
perspective-
only,
Right.
the only difference there, though, is, and so I fully agree, and I think
Yeah.
we are down a path far. I think what we don't want as a neighborhood is a technicality to change an amendment that hasn't been discussed. Now that all three parties are really working well together, that should be a very informed process. We don't want to come to, the meeting the night of and hear the language has changed, it's shifted, we now have a new amendment, because that really isn't how we've worked this negotiation. That said, I think the developer clearly stated to me as of today, and I think representing both the owner and the developer, it's good to hear you say we're not far off, so that, I guess, leaves hope. But the developer was clear to me that if we did not support the 45 condo unit bylaw, that it would move immediately per that vote to 40B, which in reality, the neighborhood obviously is against any really high density. We think we came up with a good option, one that's financially viable, makes everyone whole, and minimizes the impact on the neighborhood. I think it would be ill-advised to have changes that are not in that same spirit of transparency through the week.
Okay,
Again, I
so
think I
then-
just
hang-
keep in
hang on,
mind,
Mike.
just last comment, it'd be illogical to think that a person wouldn't pursue additional options. So when you say, if you don't support the amendment, he's going to go to 45B, why wouldn't he do it anyway?
Right. No, that's, I think that's the
And I
point.
keep one last point in mind, good cop, bad cop. Keep that in mind.
Okay, so then, we're going to wrap this part up now. I think we've heard from everybody.
Can I just add one?
About the amendment? Yes. Okay, all right. And then we need to wrap this up, because we have a public hearing that has been waiting very patiently for
So the Carberry neighborhood and the Hemingway Woods, otherwise known as Milton Muse neighborhood, want to support the Hillside neighborhood as